So now I have my selected side of my drape, and I've taped it to my paper. Starting off with a straight line to book this edge to, I've only cut out the half that I prefer, and I've cut it right on the center front line. This side seam has been adjusted so that it represents a combination of the side that I didn't prefer and the side that I did. So that I've adjusted and let the bust out a little bit, taken the waist and the hip in just slightly, so that now they're more compatible with the overall circumference of the drape. The armhole, shoulder, and neckline is coming off my preferred side and not influenced by the other. Now, all I'm doing here is just taping it down without stretching it. I'm just taping down the corners of my pattern and just getting it like this. Now make sure, see, I've stretched that one just a little bit. You want to be very careful with this knit not to stretch it. So when you put it on, just be very, very careful to smooth it out gently and not stretch. It's a very delicate hand here. There, much better. Now it's very simple. We're going to go around this edge and we're going to do a dashed line. So I'm just going to start here. I'm marking on my tape. I'm going to leave the tape on the paper. That way I know I've got accurate corners. And I'm just making a small dashed line all the way around this muslin. So now I have my dotted line drawn all the way around my muslin, my knit muslin drape. And right here where my HBL line was on my form, as you notice, it's not straight. It curves up a little bit. So I'm utilizing this line, and I've dropped down 2 inches, and this is going to be my hip or hem line, my hip and hem line there. It's not exactly straight because the body's curved, and when I went around the side, this being a knit, it lifted up a slight bit. Now we're going to take the fabric out from under the tape, leaving the tape on the paper because it has marks on it and we don't want to lose those marks. And I'm just going to slip it out from under, holding the tape. And there I have my front pattern. I'm going to use my very curve and my straight ruler, and we're going to solidify all the lines. So now I'll take my very curve and I'm just going to go along the areas where my line is curved, which on this particular pattern is a lot. The bust, the waistline, the hips, everything pretty much is curved here. A little different than the woven where there were a lot more straight lines, and the fit was built off of making darts and style lines that caused the fit to be close to the body. So this time we're depending on the stretch of the fabric to do this, so the outside edges of our lines are a lot more curved than they were on the woven. So that's a side seam. Now we'll do the armhole. The only other straight line besides the center front will be the shoulder seam. Well, we want that one straight. So I'm just going to, and I want to lead in here as I did on my woven. I want to lead in with a square line here, and I want my shoulder to be square at the armhole. Now, a little different at the neckline. I don't necessarily, in this case, need it square right here because it's feeding into the back neck, and this might be at a slight angle. So that'll be an exception to the rule here. We won't be squaring the high point shoulder like we normally would in a woven. And I just want to bring this around, get a nice solid line all the way around my front bodice. Now I'm not adding seam allowance. This is a block. It's meant to be a working pattern where I would turn it into other styles. And the seam allowance will just get in my way. So I'm going to just leave it as is, add notches, and cut it out very simply. And then when I finish the back, I'll walk the two together, true and blend them, to make sure they're the same length in the seams, and you'll have a smooth transition between the seams. And then I'll have my block finished except for my sleeve. So one more line, move it down here just a little bit, and I'm going to get the bottom hem line. Now remember, it has a slight arc to it. That's okay. We like that. So I'm just going to lift it up very gently out here at the side seam, making sure that this line too is square. So I have a square here, square here, not necessarily here, square here. This is the front, and it's my knit torso block. So I'm just going to mark it so I don't forget. And then I'm going to add a small notch, 2.5 inches up roughly in the armhole. There's 2, there's another half, so right about right here, I'm going to add 1 single notch in the armhole. This is the only notch I'm putting on this block because I'm going to be using it to make other things off of, and this is to help me get my sleeve in the proper place. So that notch will stay. I really don't need any other notches. Okay, so let me cut this one out and get set up for the back, and we'll make the back pattern and then move into the sleeve. So now I have my back torso copied off my knit muslin, and I used the dashed lines, and then I've solidified them with my berry curve and my ruler. It's time now to walk the 2 pieces, the front and the back, and make sure everything is even. So I'm going to start here at high point shoulder, and I put my shoulder together, and it looks very good. I'll just cut on the inside of the green line, and it should be okay there. Now I want to true and blend this neckline as well, and the armhole. So I'm going to put the shoulder together in this fashion, and now I can see that this shoulder is a bit longer. So I'm going to just shave that little point off to 0 pretty quickly in the back armhole. Nice smooth blend here, this smooth transition, and this is also going to be a smooth blend once I correct that little corner. So shoulders and neckline and armhole look good there. So now I'm going to walk my side seam out, and I just hold the edge of my paper, and wherever the paper starts to veer away from the back bodice, the front bodice paper, then I hold it and I put it back on line. And I just keep doing this all the way down to the bottom of my shirt. So right there, it looks like the front might be slightly longer than the back, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to check out the armhole by booking the side seam. Very nice. I like the back armhole. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. And yes, the front is a little tiny bit longer. It's about, a 1/16, but I want this to be as perfect as possible. So I'm going to change the shape here a little bit and just take off just ever such a slight bit along the side here of my front. That way there's a nice smooth transition here. It doesn't come to a point. And the last thing I'm going to do is put my notches in my back armhole. So I'm going to come up about 2.5 inches, and I'm going to put my notches, this time a double notch, because I want to delineate this being the back armhole from the front armhole. Now note that I'm using carrot notches on this. On a knit, you want to use carrot notches. You don't want to clip notch because you could cause it to run, or you could leave a hole in your fabric. So it's better when you're using knits to use a carrot notch. Now none of this has seam allowance, so I'm going to mark that on my pattern so I remember, because this is a working block. And it's a lot more difficult to work when I have seam allowance on it, because I'm constantly having to take it on and off when I'm changing the design and making different things. So we're going to leave it with no seam allowance and just add the seam allowance when we cut it out. So here's the back and the front block, and now it's time to make the sleeve. So let me get set up for that, and I'll show you how to do the sleeve. So now it's time to make our sleeve for our knit top. So we're going to work with several measurements here. The first is going to be our sleeve length. So our sleeve length will be 23 inches. Our sleeve cap, we're going to start with 5 inches. And our wrist opening will be 7 inches. So the sleeve opening at the wrist will be 7 inches. And our bicep level line will be 12 inches. So these are the measurements we're going to work with to build our sleeve. And the first line we're going to draw is our sleeve length. So we're going to take our paper and draw a line 23 inches long here. So I'm going to go from right here, and I'm going to make a little T mark so I know that that's the top of my sleeve. and I'm going to draw to 23. So that's the first line I'm going to make. And then I'm going to take my sleeve opening, 7 inches, and I'm going to put 3.5 on each side at the base of my sleeve, representing my sleeve opening. And that will be 7 inches. So this will be where my sleeve opening is, and that's the top of my sleeve cap. And then I'm going to measure down my cap height, which is 5 inches. I'm going to put a line. And then I'm going to measure across here. This is my bicep level, and I'm going to put 12 inches in here. So that's 6 inches on each side. So this line will be 12. Just like that. Now, once I have all these points, I start connecting them together. So I'm going to connect the outside points all the way around. And then we're going to connect the cap. So the cap will be a triangular shape. And I'm going to go from the cap height to the bicep level line. Right there. And I'm going to do the same over here. And the next step is we're going outside line rules here. I kind of slipped. The next thing we're going to do is divide this cap height into 1.25 inches. So we're going to go 1.25 inches. There'll be 3 of these. 1.25 inches. Making sure I stay parallel to my bicep level line. And one more time, 1.25 inches. So now it's time to build our cap. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to come up 3/4, and that's off the outside line. Ruler slip just a little bit there. Making sure I stay square, 90-degree angle to the diagonal line. So that's going to be my first 3/4, and I'm going to do it on both sides on the top line. 3/4 and 3/4, staying perpendicular to my angled line. Now I'm going to come up just 1/4 right here, just 1/4, same thing, staying perpendicular to my diagonal line. So 1/4 here. And then this is going to be the back, and this is going to be the front. So in the back, I'm going to come down 1/4. This is where it gets different. The back measurement is a little different than the front. And in the front, you're going to come down 1/2. This gives you more scoop in the front for comfort when you're wearing your top. Now after you have all of these little dots drawn in, you want to start connecting them. So I'm going to connect the first 3, the cap height and the next 2 dots. I'm going to draw a line connecting all 3 of these together. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, cap height and these 2. Now I want to show you what happens when you do this. Sometimes you get what I call a heart shape up here. If you do, just blend off and fill in that little bit. It's about, a little more than 1/16 of an inch. That's quite all right to do that. Sometimes it happens. And then you're going to blend these 3 with the underarm point, where the bicep level line is. You're going to blend those off. See, it starts to make a nice smooth curve for your sleeve cap. Now, over here, when you do these 2, these underarm lines, you want to go down and out with the tight part of your curve. When you do the sleeve cap, you want to go in and up with the tight part of your curve. So in and out. Otherwise, your curve will be oddly shapen. So remember, down and out with the tight part here at the underarm points, and in and up with the top. So there we have it. There's our sleeve cap and our entire sleeve. So what I want to do now is I want to walk the sleeve out. So I'm going to turn it so that I can get to it comfortably. And I'm going to walk the sleeve cap out, making sure that I start at the underarm and I use the back, my back sleeve armhole here, and I'm just going to hold it with my pin and just gently turn it every time the lines separate. Now as I get to my notches, I can go ahead and draw my notches in. That way it's done. And I want to just follow it all the way up to the sleeve cap and see where it ends. Wherever this armhole ends at the shoulder point, I'm going to make a little mark on my sleeve. And that way I'll know how much I have left over. So it's basically right on the grain line. That's where the back comes to. Now let's walk the front and see where it comes to. Again, start at the underarm And you just want to hold your pin and draw the notches in as you come to them. And then we're just going to, every time the line separates, I just adjust it again till it's back on track. And when we get to the top, the shoulder point of this armhole, we'll mark it off onto our sleeve. So we have about a 1/2 inch ease. So anywhere from a 1/2 inch ease to 0 is perfectly fine on a knit. You really don't need a lot of ease. You can get away with no ease on an armhole, a sleeve cap on a knit. A 1/2 inch is comfortable though, so I'm going to leave it for the time being. And then after I sew my first muslin, if I need to adjust it or take any out, I'll take it out at that time. So basically that's it. That's the sleeve for our torso block. And the next step would be to sew the muslin and check the fit one more time. And you will have your beautiful knit torso block pattern. So I'm just going to put on here no seam allowance. And there it is. There's your sleeve ready to be cut out. And here is your 2 pieces. Here's your back, which lines up with this back armhole. And here's the front. So once I cut these out, I can add seam allowance to my muslin, sew one up, and look at my beautiful block.